Hello, welcome to Loops by Lucia. My name is Lucia, and this is my channel where I talk about knitting, crocheting, and any other crafty thing I happen to be into at the moment. And today I'm putting together my very first knitting podcast. When I started this channel, my eventual goal was to be doing consistent knitting podcasts. I've been watching them for what feels like ages. I always have them on in the background when I'm knitting or crocheting. I can play them for hours and hours on end and just feel completely relaxed. And I like them a lot as not just relaxation, background noise, but also as educational material. I like them as reflections and time capsules of the projects that you're working on. And I think that I will be able to learn a lot from making these videos about what does and doesn't work in my knitting process and what I can continue to improve upon as I continue my knitting journey. So grab a project and let's go ahead and get chatting here. In this knitting podcast, I'm going to be discussing a finished object that I have, as well as 3 works in progress that I'm currently spending time on. This being my first knitting podcast, I do want to mention that I have probably about a dozen projects that are sitting around hibernating for God knows how long, and I don't know if I will ever go back to those, but I wanted to use these podcasts to be specifically focused on the projects that I am actively working on at the moment. So those will be the whips that I will show you later on in this video. So my first object today that I want to show you is a finished summer knit garment. This is the staple linen top by Joji Locatelli, who's one of my favorite designers. This is a sport weight knit, and it features a couple of really cool design elements that I like a lot. It features this center column of half twisted rib down the center of the front, as well as a slightly wider column of the half twisted rib down the center of the back. The armholes have a raw edge, and then at the bottom we do have a bottom band of that half twisted rib. In the pattern, there is also a rolled neckline, which I modified to be a few more rows of that half twisted rib. This is made using a 21 stitch 30 row gauge on 3.5mm needles. I did use those needles and I did meet gauge, and the yarn that I used was Juniper Moon Farm Zoe Spray in the color Gold Coast. And I knit a medium sized top for myself, which is, I believe, the 3rd size on the pattern. The way that this garment is constructed is starting with the back. You start with the 2 separate shoulders. You knit a couple of rows, increasing towards the base of that neckline. You connect them there, then you knit them flat all the way down to the bottom of the armholes. Then you pick up stitches from those shoulders and you knit the 2 shoulder sides of the front, again increasing, connecting them slightly lower, and then again knitting down flat to the bottom of the armholes, where it is then connected and knit in the round for the rest of the project. As I mentioned, the modification I made for the neckline, I did also add 1 inch of stockinette to the body. I felt like this would be a little bit too cropped up top for me if I didn't add that extra inch. And I am glad that I did, because it ended up really working out well for me. So this was one of the first summer knits that I've done, and one of the first ones that I chose as well. When I was looking to choose summer garments, I had a really difficult time picking what I wanted to make, because I have a couple of things that I'm personally self-conscious about. One of them being any sort of cap sleeve, because I'm nervous about sweating, and from experience I know that odor can be extremely difficult to get out of yarn and knit garments, so I tried to stay away from anything with a cap sleeve, no matter how gorgeous they looked. So let's talk about my experience with this project. So a couple of things I want to discuss about the finished object before I go into the construction and my actual experience making the project. And the first thing is, when I started working on this project, I didn't quite understand what ease was. I didn't quite understand that negative ease means that it is going to be a tighter fit to your body. And if I had known that, I think I would have made an even larger size. This is a 0 ease or negative ease top. It recommends 0 to 2 inches of negative ease for the top. And as I've been working through this and wearing it out, I realized that I am a lot more comfortable in myself if I have a little bit of a drapier fuller, looser top. So I'm glad I had the experience of knitting something that had that negative ease, but I have not been enjoying wearing it. I believe I did this to about 1 inch of negative ease. And now I want to talk about what I talked about in my yarn tour video, which is this yarn. And I'm actually going to go ahead and pull it from the wall because I did not finish all of the skeins that I had. So this is the yarn that I was using for the project. This is Juniper Moon Farm Zoe Spray. It's a soft cotton linen blend, 60% cotton, 40% linen, 284 yards in a 100-gram ball. This is a sport weight yarn. And something I want to start doing on these podcasts is actually shouting out the place where I purchased the yarn that I used for my projects, just to maybe give a little bit of a shout out to these amazing local yarn stores that are in my area. So this I bought from Second Story Knits in Bethesda, Maryland. And when I purchased this, I had been really staying safe about the kind of yarns that I would use. I would use very simple, at most heathered, certainly not variegated yarn. And I really wanted to step out of my comfort zone and try something that was a little bit daring for me, a little bit challenging for me to use, and I thought that I would really enjoy the result of the color. And I do want to talk about that color because I think that the color itself turned out really well. It was really nerve-wracking making this because as I was going, I would start to look at it, especially as I got to, you know, the separate flat pieces as I was working. I was like, oh, I am not sure about this color for this project. In the picture on the pattern, Joji uses just a plain black yarn and it brings out the columns really well and is very effective. So as I was working through this, I was like, I really don't know if I made the right choice here. But what I typically do is I buy yarn and then I choose patterns based on what I have. And this was one of the only sport weight yarns in my collection, which is why I initially chose it. As I mentioned in my yarn tour video, what I ended up falling into was issues with tension and gauge, specifically caused by these extra plies that are woven into the yarn. So if you take a look at this yarn up close, you will find that some of the pieces of yarn are very sort of standard. You can see how tightly knit that is, right? It's nice and thin. You probably have it's a little hard to tell, but like 2 to 3 plies of varying colors that are sort of woven together. And then you get to a completely random part of the yarn. I'm just going to pick out basically a random piece right here. And you see the difference right off the bat. This is the same colors, but you get this really thick, fluffy ply that is woven in just to give it some texture, I guess. And I don't think that's a terrible thing. I think it's fun that this yarn is as adventurous as it is, but I think I really chose the wrong yarn for a knitted wearable garment. I think this would be perfect for a table runner or an accessory of some sort or a home project. I think this would be beautiful for because I really do love that texture. But it just made it really, really difficult to get evenness across my stitches. And I'll show a picture or two here showing spots where the yarn suddenly becomes extremely thin or suddenly becomes extremely thick, and you can just tell that there is issues in my tension, there are issues in my gauge. It doesn't look as clean as a typical yarn would look for a garment. So I would caution anybody planning to use this yarn. The colors are stunning, and I ended up with a project that I like, but I think if I were to knit this project again, I 100% would pick a yarn that was not this yarn. The other thing I want to talk about with this project is how long it took me to get through. So this project took me, I would say, about 4 months to get through. And typical with me and projects like this that are sort of one easy pattern all the way through, where it's not a lot of detail and there's not a lot of variation in what I'm working on, I get really excited to work on it. And the first part of this, with these shoulder bits that would increase, come down, and then work them towards the armholes, I got through that very quickly. I remember that I finished both the front and the back of that and started knitting in around a couple of days in, maybe 5 or 6 days in. But everything else took me so long because I would just feel like it was never going to end. I think that's a little bit because of the thickness of the needle. I was using some pretty thin needles, those 3.5 millimeter needles, which I'm not used to using. I am used to and enjoy using basically 4.5 or higher. So I was really feeling like it was never gonna end. And then with the fact that I wasn't really liking how it was looking, I just didn't feel motivation really ever to work on this project. So it sat dormant in my stash for about 2 solid months. So when I finally picked this out of my stash to keep working on it again, I said, okay, listen, Lucia, you have about 6-7 inches left to work on here. There's about 7.5 rows for each inch. You can push through. Each row takes between 10 and 15 minutes to make. If you just take some dedicated time to work on this, you will be done with this in no time and you will have a finished summer garment, which I had very few of. So I pushed myself, I finally finished this, and you know what? I am happy with how this looks, and I really like how it blocked out. I will link a TikTok that I made showing me blocking out this pattern. I finished knitting this at like 1:30 in the morning and then was just feeling this urge to go ahead and block it right then and there, which I did. So that is the staple linen top. I ended up pretty pleased with the outcome, but have certainly not felt any urgent need to knit up another pattern like this again. So now we're gonna get into my works in progress, or my whips, and I'm going to be taking a look, as I mentioned, at the whips that I'm currently actively working on. And the first one that I have is very close to being done. In fact, I think I will have it done probably in the next week at the latest, and that is the Wood Anemone Pullover by Sari Nordlund. This is a top-down knit with a beautiful lace pattern all over the yoke, and a very basic stockinette body with a bottom band, and then these long sleeves, again with that cuff of that half-twisted rib. This features a folded over collar, also made of the half-twisted rib, which you can either sew together to make it folded, or you can do the knit two together, picking up stitches from the cast-on edge. And I took the easy way out and I sewed it because I'm lazy. The gauge for this is 20 stitches and 28 rows on 4 millimeter needles for your 4-inch square. And there are 3 different needle sizes that you use during this project. So you have your body, and that's going to be your basic 4 millimeter needles. Then you have your lace yoke, and this is 3.5 millimeter. And then any of your ribbed accents, your cuffs, your neckline, your bottom band are all using 3 millimeter needles. I ended up needing to go up a full millimeter on each one of the needle sizes in order to get gauge. So I ended up using 5 millimeter for the stockinette, 4.5 for the yoke, and 4 for the ribbed accents. The suggested yarn is a fingering and a lace, or a mohair, and I believe the pattern uses Lanagato VIP for the fingering and then uses Filcolonatilia for the mohair. And instead of doing that, I just used 1 strand of DK, and I used the Kelbourne Woolen Scout in the color Moss Heather. This is this really stunning foresty green with heather pieces of yellow and blue and red all over. It is a 100% wool yarn, and it is so unbelievably plush and soft, and I have loved working with it so far. The recommended ease is 2 to 6 inches of positive ease, and I have been making the size 3 in order to get sort of the higher end of that positive ease. A couple modifications that I did make. There is some optional short row shaping for the back, which I did end up doing. That comes right after the yoke portion is done. You just have about 8 or 9 rows, I believe, of some slight shaping to raise the back neck. Another is that Sari Nordlund with this pattern does the body extremely cropped, and I believe with 8.25 inches of the stockinette, and I wanted a nice long cozy comfy fall sweater that would make me feel really nice and warm and not make me feel like I needed to be wearing like jeans or something high-waisted in order to rock this. So I ended up doing, I believe, 12 inches for the stockinette on the body instead. One more thing that is an option for you in this pattern, it does give you the option to use bobbles in your lace, which I didn't end up doing just for ease's sake. I just did exactly what was written on the chart. I have been really itching to make a fall pullover, and I had this beautiful yarn, this Kelbor Woolen Scout, which I got from Fiber Space in Alexandria, Virginia. A gorgeous store, go check it out if you can. And I was really excited to use it on something that would be cozy and plush and comfortable. And I had found that I was being really uninterested in the summer knits that I had planned, because finishing things like the staple linen top or like the Hearts on Love Drops design top, the weather where I live just didn't really give me any opportunity to wear those knits. I ended up being unable to wear them because even though the yarn was cotton or linen or something that was kind of cooling to the touch, this is very much cool to the touch, I just felt that with the 90+ degree weather that we've been having where I live all summer, this would just feel thick and heavy and hot. Even though there's no sleeve, it's pretty short, I just didn't really experience an opportunity to wear it out. So I've just been saying, all right, this is not really working. I know that in the fall I'm gonna wear sweaters galore, so I just really wanted to jump in and just go ahead and make one. I had done gauge for 3 different patterns, I believe, and this was the one that I was most able to make at that moment based on the materials that I had, and the one that I thought, this is exciting. This is my first Sari Nordlund pattern. This is one of my first sort of elaborate lace patterns as well. I really want to just see how I can make this. And I'm so glad that I did it, and I'm so glad that it's almost done because I cannot wait to wear this. Something that I really like about this yarn is just the density that it has here. Now, the recommended needle size, I believe, is 4 or 4.5 for this yarn, but even with this 5mm, it's created this beautiful, thick, sort of dense fabric that is extremely soft to the touch. I just want to like sleep on it. I want to use this as like a blanket. It's just so unbelievably cozy. So like I said, I am almost done with this. I probably have maybe 4 or 5 more days left on this project. I have a couple more pieces to do. I still have to do the sewn tubular bind off for this one sleeve, and I did go ahead and start the other sleeve earlier today, and that is already working up very, very quickly. The sleeves have these very basic 8-row decreases as you go down. It looks pretty seamless. I think you could technically like see a little bit of those decreases as you go down, but I'm hoping that with blocking that will easily come out. I do want to talk really quickly about the lace, and I really love the way that the lace turned out. These sort of leaf motifs, I think, turn out really beautifully. It has this sort of small leaf to start, and then it grows and grows into these larger leaves at the bottom. And the pattern gives you the option to use a chart or use written instructions. I ended up using a chart, and I found that by doing it in the round, I was able to sort of understand where the next row would go, and it wouldn't really surprise me very often. So there were points where I was able to put down the chart for quite a while and just knit, and I found that that was really motivating me to continue working on this pattern, and I've really loved the way that it has all sort of come to be so far. So hopefully in the next podcast I will have a finished wood anemone pullover, and I will be on to a new fall sweater. My next whip that I want to talk about is the Adria top, also by Joji Locatelli. This is what I have so far. It's kind of a little cropped bralette size right now, and I am currently working on the body, which is the last big piece of this top. This is a DK weight top. It is primarily stockinette, as you see, but as you get to the sides, there are these lace panels that come together to create this really beautiful design that I think when I do end up wearing it will end up looking quite slimming on me, which is very exciting for me. It has the same construction as the staple linen top, so you start with the shoulders of the back, increase towards the neckline, get all the way down to the armholes, hold the stitches, pick up from the shoulders, do the front the exact same way, and then pick up everything in the round until you're finished with the project. The gauge for this is 20 stitches and 26 rows on size 6 needles. I ended up using size 7 to match gauge, so I've got 4.5mm needles on my project right now. The top recommends 0 to 2 inches of negative ease, but as I previously talked about, now that I understand a lot more about ease, I've decided to make a size large enough that I will hopefully have closer to 2 inches of positive ease on me. The suggested yarn for this pattern is Queen City Yarns Coleman, and I am using Lena's Du Nord Soft Lino in the color Peach, which is an 80% linen, 20% Pima cotton yarn. And I do plan to modify the neckline to have the same half-twisted rib detail of the staple linen top. Either that, or I might just let it be raw. I don't really like the look of a rolled edge, so we will see how I end up feeling once I'm done with the majority of the project. Now, there are quite a few pros and cons to this. Similar to the staple linen top, I started working on this and was very motivated by the lace paneling. I thought that was such a beautiful design. Oh, we've got a hair there, eyelash maybe. But I was really motivated by the design element of the lace pattern. It's this 6-row section that you repeat over and over. And I just really like the elegance and the femininity of the lace of this. I just think it's very vintage looking. I think it's beautiful. And I haven't found a whole lot of other patterns that have lace work down the sides as opposed to showing full force in the front. So it almost feels like a little bit of a surprise. You like turn to the side and there's like, oh, these beautiful lace panels that you got there. I think the panels look beautiful up close. I think they look even better further away. And I think far away, once I put this all together, hopefully it will look like a store-bought piece, if not a very classy looking top. There have been some cons with this lace though, primarily as I was working this flat when I was working the front and then the back separately. I found that the 6-row lace sections were extremely hard to memorize. When I would go knit in one direction and I would do the panel and then I would come back with the purl, I just never knew exactly what to look for to help guide me into the next row. So I basically had my eyes glued on the chart for the lace panels the entire time that I was working this flat. And then when I got to the rounded area, when I was knitting in the round, I found that it was easier in one direction. Notice that the panels sort of have this symmetrical split in direction. So I was finding that it was very easy to memorize on one direction, but the other one I still don't quite have yet, which has been demotivating for me to work on this because it feels like I'm just going to be stuck staring at a pattern for as long as I work on this, which I just don't want to do. I do want to briefly talk about the yarn itself because I picked it out and also got it from Second Story Knits in Bethesda, Maryland, because of the softness. It is unbelievably soft and has sort of this slippery effect with the plies where it doesn't feel like it's a tight roped together yarn. It just feels like it's this cushiony fabric almost within the yarn itself. So I'll just hold up a little bit of this so you can see. And as you are looking at this, I'm not sure if the camera is picking it up, but you can also see this fuzziness that is emanating. So I have had a lot of issues with splitting and fuzzing up within this yarn before I have even knitted into the top, and that has been unpleasant. As I've been knitting this and just splitting constantly, I end up with a yarn that sometimes just has weird issues within the top. Like if you take a look at that, that is not great. I don't love that. That is not ideal. And that is not a rare situation with this pattern. It feels like there are mistakes everywhere that are not necessarily my fault. It's just the prone to splittiness of this yarn that has been wonderfully pleasant texturally to use and extremely difficult to use from a technique level. So I will let you know as I continue to work on this if I continue to have those issues with this yarn. I also do want to be completely honest and say that I don't think I've touched this in about a month or so. Similar to the staple linen top, I will sort of pick it up and do a row or two, but then I will put it away for ages, it seems like, because I just am not motivated to work on this for a couple of the reasons that I previously mentioned with the other summer top, which is that I'm just not loving the experience of knitting this, and I also don't feel like there are going to be ample opportunities for me to wear this, especially now that summer is sort of coming to a close. It's like, all right, well, the weather might be perfect for me to wear this, but then why not just wear a sweater? Why not just wear something that feels really, really cozy on my skin? And the other thing is, unfortunately, I do regret this color choice. I think that in the store and on the ball, this sort of salmon peachy color is really beautiful, but I think that with my unbelievably pale skin that has sort of these cool undertones, I think that this is just going to wash me out when I wear it. So I'm really not looking forward to actually putting this on my body, which is not where you want your knitted garments to be. I will update you if I continue to work on this, but I wouldn't be surprised if once I finish the wood anemone pullover that I just put this in the graveyard of whips that I have in my house and just switch over to another sweater pattern that I think I will be more likely to use. I also might pick this up next summer and see if I can finish it then if I have a renewed interest in it. So my last whip that I want to talk about today is this very heavy cardigan that I have here, and this is a crochet garment that I've been working on. This is the men's shawl color cardigan by Jennifer Renaud of A Crocheted Simplicity. So this is this, oh my god, unbelievably heavy cardigan that I have been working on for my boyfriend for about 2 to 3 months, and I am finally almost done with it. I just have one sleeve left to go and then I will be all finished. This is an Aran weight cardigan and it uses a 5.5mm hook, although when you do the increases for each of the panels, when you do the chain before you increase, it usually wants you to switch to a slightly larger hook, which was a 6mm, and then go back to crocheting with a 5.5. I ended up doing that, but I don't feel like you really have to. So you could totally get away with just doing a 5.5 as you go. I used Caron 1 pound in the color Kelly Green, which is an 100% acrylic yarn that I believe I just got from Michael's. And I've used a lot of it, and I will get to the yarn in a moment, but I do want to talk about the construction of this as well. So like many crochet cardigans in particular, this whole thing is knit in separate panels. So you do your 2 separate front side panels, which is going to be from about here down, not including the band that I have here, or no, this one does include the ribbing at the bottom as part of the panels. Yes. So you have the 2 front panels, and then you have this really long rectangle back panel as well. Then you sew them together, and then you start to create this shawl piece, which is just a couple of rows of slip stitches that are back and forth, starting at the bottom, coming all the way to about here. You go back and forth, you decrease a little bit, and then you do the same with the other side. Finally, you take the 2 separate sides and you create a ribbing that happens across the 2 to create sort of this collar that you have. At that point, you then incorporate buttons, which you're going to have made slots for in the ribbing as you go, which I did. Then you add some pockets, and then you work on the sleeves, which are separate panels that you sew together and then put the whole thing together for. So this is a really long, arduous project, and no lie, it has been an absolute slog to get through for a couple of reasons. And the first thing I want to talk about is the yarn. So like I said, I've been using the Caron 1 pound Kelly Green for this. My boyfriend wanted specifically a Slytherin themed cardigan because we are both proud Slytherins, both obsessed with Harry Potter, and I thought it would be really nice to make for him. So I actually went through a couple of patterns, a couple of swatches, and couldn't really find anything that jumped out to me. And then eventually I got to this pattern and I said, all right, I'll just stick with it and we'll just hope for the best and hopefully I'll finish this pattern. This pattern is 44 pages long and this yarn is in 1 pound, like giant balls. And because of the length of the pattern, because of all of these elements that you have here, I have gone through over 2 pounds of this yarn, which is over 1,600 yards, and I still have this entire sleeve left to go. And that's the thing with crocheting. If you're a knitter and you're like, oh my god, that's the most yarn I've ever heard of being used on anything ever, that's pretty standard for crochet. You just go through a lot of yarn really quickly. And because of that, I end up usually choosing budget or value yarns for my crochet projects because you just go through so much and it would just be a lot cheaper for me to pick something that is already cheap than to go and get a nice yarn from a local store and use so much of it for a project. Now, not just is this yarn stiff because of its acrylicness, but it actually has been uncomfortable to use because of that stiffness. I can only get through a couple of rows at a time maximum whenever I work on this project because I don't know if I just have terrible technique with my crocheting, even though I was a crocheter religiously a couple of years ago, solely crochet. I don't know what it is, but I get this rope burn and it just makes me so uncomfortable and this yarn is so unbelievably thick. I've used Caron 1 pound before and I don't remember it ever being this tough or uncomfortable to use before. So that has been extremely unpleasant working on this. But I've sort of been just braving it and working myself through the project, and thankfully I am so close to being done that I will never have to work with this yarn again if I don't want to. The other reason this has been taking forever is because the actual stitches that you're using are all slip stitched based. So what you have here for each row is either a row completely made of slip stitches back and forth, or you have it alternating with half double slip stitches and then the slips right at the end to create the ribbing at the bottom. And that means that it works up a lot slower than crochet usually does. Crochet, I feel like, is famous for working up really, really fast. But even with a large hook, it just feels like this thing is just impossible to finish. And it just like feels like it's this cloud on my crafting. I just have to finish this at some point. And I don't feel any ill will towards my boyfriend, that's for sure. I just wanted to do something nice for him and I'm paying the price. Don't worry, I've made him pieces before. You can actually check out another TikTok that I made in which I show how I made a Kingdom Hearts themed hoodie for him, which he is absolutely in love with. And I was also using Caron 1 pound. Again, like, I don't understand why it is so rough this time around. But again, like I said, I have just one sleeve left to make. I have not started that sleeve. I don't know when I will. I really feel like I should just get it done and just be over and through with this and never have to touch this yarn ever again. I don't feel like there is any issue with the pattern itself. It's just been so arduous to get through and I just want to have fun, and I feel like this crochet project is no longer fun for me. I'm really hoping that my boyfriend doesn't see this, but if he does, I love you so much and it will turn out very well once I block this, but I am just so ready to be done with this entire project. And that is where I'm going to stop the knitting podcast for today. I don't have any current ideas or specific plans of what I'm going to be working on next. I've made a couple of gauge swatches for a couple of projects, and I'm sure I will pick one of them to work on and will explain in my next video what my choice was. I might start a couple and just have fun jumping from project to project, but the number one thing I want to do is at least finish the cardigan for my boyfriend and the wood anemone sweater. I don't really mind putting the Adria to rest for a little while, but we'll see what I feel the motivation to do. If you enjoyed this video, please consider going down below to follow me on Instagram, TikTok, Ravelry, and then consider subscribing to me here. I am planning to do one of these between once every week or every other week. So if you want more content like this in your inbox, just go ahead and press that subscribe button for me. And feel free to leave a comment below on whatever projects you're working on. I'm always looking for more pattern inspirations, so if you have something that you think I might like making, go ahead and just drop it below as well. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye guys.